here. I was here in April, and it's great to be back. So, I'm a recovering venture capitalist. What does that mean? It means somebody who used to invest in startup companies and work with startup companies, and then guess what I discovered? I discovered there was way too much money, and people were coming to me for money when they needed help. And if they got help, they could raise money. So I became a dropout. Not like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, but or Mark Zuckerberg. I became a dropout. And I decided I would work with startup companies. And that was 15 years ago. And guess what? I'm still working with startup companies. I work with them in Silicon Valley. I work with them all over the world. Michelle and I did a count yesterday. She's traveled around the world 6 times so far this year. I've only traveled around the world 5 times this year. I got to catch up with her. So I'm going to talk a little bit about raising money. Money is one of my favorite words. Milestones is another favorite word, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So Michelle put up that nice slide of the road, and it really looks like a nice road and easy to drive. But I'm going to tell you a story for a minute about my learning to drive. Most of you learned how to drive, yeah? Not easy when you first learn. You get really nervous, and all of a sudden things pop out in the middle of the road. And so you turn the steering wheel, you do all sorts of things. Well, I got my driver's license, and then one day something came in the middle of the road, and I hit it. And it wasn't good for the car, and I went to see my father, and I said, "Dad, crashed the car," and I said, you know, this dog moved into the middle of the road, and I had to avoid the dog. And he said, "John, that's okay. You know, these things happen." And you know, the road often does have lots of surprises, and sometimes there are other surprises you find in the road, as you do in a startup. And actually, when I hit the brick wall and told my dad that a brick wall came in the middle of the road, he didn't believe me. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, it wasn't there, and suddenly it appeared in the middle of the road. But in a sense, that's what happens in a startup. You're driving along, and all of a sudden, this brick wall shows up. And you're driving pretty fast, because in a startup, you want to be going really, really fast. And you really don't want to stop. And guess what sometimes happens? You crash. Oops, sorry. You crash. Right? And that's what happens with people when they're trying to raise capital. They're going really fast, they want to raise that money, they want to get going and do all the things they want to, and it's the piece of the business that slows them down the most. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is how to avoid crashing, how to avoid stopping. I'm going to give you some hints as to how you can figure out how not to crash, but how you can go around the wall, under the wall, over the wall. Because if you're in a startup, that's one of your key jobs. They're going to be walls. Those brick walls are going to appear in the middle of that road. And your job is not to stop, not to crash, but to figure a way to keep going. So before you raise capital, there are things you need to do. And this is the piece that people more often than not forget about, because they want to immediately go and raise capital. You've got to be prepared. There are things you need to do in advance. I'm going to tell you about some of those things. Michelle talked about it a little earlier, the concept of focus. And focus means a lot of different things. but it's a really, really important concept. One of the key things we see with companies is people love product. They love technology. All of you have your smartphone, you have your gadget on you. We all have those. We love that. But if you're raising capital, you need to be talking about the business. Because an investor, while they may or may not be interested in your product, they're there to make money. They care a lot about the business. And they are interested in investing in a business that's going to grow and be successful. And I see people all the time having 5 minutes to present, and guess what? The first 4.5 minutes, they're talking about product. It doesn't leave a lot of time to talk about the business. And focus means other things as well. Who is your customer? Being very, very focused on who it is who's going to buy your product. What markets are you going to go after? And yes, there are lots of people who could buy your product, but if you focus on everybody, you focus on nobody. And so as a startup company, you need to be laser focused. Who's customer number 1? Who's customer number 2? Who's customer number 3? Later on, you can worry about people in other parts of the world, in other market opportunities. But if you're not focused, you're not going to succeed. And the key to success is doing a few things well. The next is about your team. Michelle talked about the importance of team, finding the right people, finding the right number of people for the stage of development of your company, absolutely critical. If you don't have a product, having a customer support operation, having salespeople, that doesn't help you. It's just an expense. So making sure you have the right people for the company, the right skill set, the right number of people for where you are as a company becomes really critical. And it's not just the people who work in your company. It's advisors and mentors and board members. Those people can be absolutely invaluable to you as you build your company. And guess what? A lot of people who you bring in as advisors and mentors, they're not on the payroll. You don't have to pay them, at least with cash. So it's a good way to leverage yourself and your business. So timing matters on a business. And timing is one of the most important things for success in a startup. Don Valentine from Sequoia Capital, a very famous venture capitalist, he was the investor in little companies like Apple and Cisco. And Don Valentine would often say, too early, too early, too early, too early, just right, too late. And so thinking about when it's just right is really important. Now, if it's too early, so you build a big team, you go to market, you do a lot of things that aren't going to work, no, you need to be thoughtful. If you're too late, what do? Well, maybe there's another startup you can join. But sometimes you may think you're too late, but you may not be. Everybody hear of a little company called Google? Oh, we're here. So Google was not the first search engine. It was search engine number 6, 7, or 8. And if you ask people if the world needed another search engine, the answer was no. Why do we need another search engine? They had a better idea. They were able to produce better, more relevant search results. And as important, if not more so, they had a better business model. They found a way of making money, lots of money. Remember, I told you, money's one of my favorite words. Really, really successful company. So think about timing. It's not necessarily better to be too early or too late. It's always best if you're just right. But if you're not, there are things you can do to adjust your timing. So when people came to me as an when I was a venture capitalist and wanted an investment, the question is, so who cares? You may think it's a great product. Your mom may think it's a great product. But the only thing that matters is the market. Do customers want it? Will customers buy it? And getting that validation, either having people say, you build it, we'll buy it, that's good. Having a product and having customers pay money for it, even better yet. And the only way you find that out is not spending time in your office, coding, doing those things. You got to go out and talk to the market. Talking to the market is absolutely invaluable. And we encourage people to do that sooner rather than later. You'll learn a tremendous amount about the customer, how they see the problem, how they value what it is you're doing, and that will help you become a better company because you build a better product and understand the customer and the customer's needs even better. The last thing on the things you need to do before you raise capital is something called leverage. Very often I make presentations and there's a big conference table in front of me. Really big conference table. It weighs a lot. And I'll often say to the group, so how many of you does it take to lift this table up in the air? And people look, and there are a bunch of engineers, they calculate how much it weighs, and they look at the density of it, right? I mean, engineering people are really smart that way. And I get answers like, oh, 10 people. Sometimes I get answers like 11.5 people. I don't know where the half person comes from, but okay, 11.5 people, that works for me. And so I get all these different answers. And then somebody raises their hand and says, only takes one person. And you know what? They're right. And why is that? It's physics, right? Everybody here's taking physics? Yeah, come on, everybody's taking physics. Their favorite subject? Wasn't my favorite subject. I took it. Because with a rock and a stick, you can get leverage. And leverage helps you do things faster, cheaper, and better. And in a startup, you never have enough time, enough energy, or enough money to be able to get those 11.5 people around that table to lift it up. You could, but the guy who's going to win, the guy or gal, the person who's going to win is the one with the rock or the stick. Every business has points of leverage. Those points of leverage are different in every business, but every business has one or more. And if you're going to start a company, think about it. Think about how you can get leverage, or find 11.5 people to help you. Okay, so you've done all your prep work. You're now about and ready to go out and raise capital. And guess what? It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job in addition to the other 3 full-time jobs you have as the CEO of a startup company. But it's a full-time job, and you need to recognize it. And it means you need to be doing lots and lots of things, and probably not sleeping an awful lot. But as equally important, you need to make sure that the business is continuing to make progress as well. And that's the toughest part. That's absolutely the toughest part of doing that. And raising capital, it takes a long time. It can take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, take 1.5 years, or longer. And I'm not just talking about a company who may be raising capital in Silicon Valley from around the world. I'm talking about a company in Silicon Valley. It takes a long time to raise capital. There's a lot more money in Silicon Valley than anywhere else in the world, but there are a lot of companies who spend an awful lot of time raising capital. On the other hand, Michelle and I know a company from Hungary. The CEO came to the US. Anybody know where Sand Hill Road is? It's in the middle of Silicon Valley. It's where a lot of venture capital firms are. There's a bar there. There's a hotel and a bar. And he went into the bar at this hotel, and turns out he met a venture capitalist, and within 2 weeks of landing in Silicon Valley, he had a term sheet for $1.2 million, $1.2 million financing. So your answer is, well, it's easy to raise capital in Silicon Valley. I tell you that story because that story is 1 in a million. And you may be that 1 in a million, but if you're not, you're going to spend a bunch of time raising capital. So I like ice cream. I really like ice cream. And I love going to ice cream stores where there are lots of different flavors. And then it's hard to choose which flavor of ice cream I go with. But finding an investor is like picking ice cream, or rather matching ice cream and people. You've got to find the right match. People sometimes say to me, well, I want to meet a venture capitalist, as though it's an animal in a zoo, an endangered species. That's not the question. The question is meeting the right investor. Finding an investor who fits and invests in the technologies you're involved in, the markets you're focused on, the stage of development that you're at, the geography in which you are operating. And there are hundreds, there are thousands of venture investors. And finding the one that fits you is sort of like dating. When you date, you kind of find somebody where there's a match. And sometimes it's easy, but more often than not, it's hard. Well, I met this person, and they're not quite right, so you keep dating and dating and dating. Well, venture capital is sort of a little bit like that, but it's different. But finding that match, finding that fit is critical. Because when you take an investment, it's sort of like getting married. They're going to be with you, for better or worse, for the long haul. And while when you get married, there's always that thing called divorce. Marriage doesn't work out. It doesn't exist in venture capital. When you take money from an investor and you decide 2 years later you don't like that investor, there is no divorce. They can fire you as the CEO. You can't fire them. So finding the right investor who fits you, who fits and is interested in what you're doing is a challenge. And that applies not only to professional venture capital, it also applies to angel investors. Although it turns out angel investors, their criteria for getting involved with companies is a little different. They get involved in things they like, that intrigue them. And they're actually really good people to ask for help. Because if they get involved and provide help and give you advice and guidance, and they like what you're doing, it's more likely that they're going to invest in you as a company. So while you're doing all this, you need to make sure you maintain momentum, right? Because raising capital, it takes a long time. And so you can't have this be doing nothing for that 3 to 18-month period of time. And momentum matters. Which would I rather invest in? A company that's adding 5,000 customers a week or 5,000 customers a year? I'd rather invest in the one that's adding 5,000 customers a week. And so building momentum is really important. we're all interested in getting involved with something that's already being successful. When you're presenting, when you're going to get investment, yes, somebody is interested in your business, and they're going to invest because they think that they can make an investment and make money in your company. But they're evaluating you and your credibility. And so we spend a lot of time encouraging people, when Michelle and I work with startups, to learn how to be good presenters, to learn how to be good storytellers. Because connecting with the audience, building that credibility is absolutely critical. Because I'm not only investing in the product and the technology and the business, I'm investing in you as a founder and CEO, that you're going to be successful, you're going to do what it takes, and you're going to make me a lot of money. So you've done all those things, you did your homework, you did all these steps, you get an investment, and then you sit back and relax, right? No. Right? People tried doing that. Remember the internet bust, 2000? There was a whole generation of companies who thought that the goal was to raise as much money as they could. It isn't. To build a successful business, don't ever lose sight of that. When you get the money, it's just the start of more work. I told you that money is my favorite word. Milestones is my next favorite word. Milestones is how you measure how well you're doing, and how I as an investor measure how well you're doing. And I'm interested in meaningful milestones, milestones that build value. So hiring 3 engineers, moving to a new office, those are expenses. That's not value. Introducing the product to the market, getting a distribution partner, making a major sale, those are things that add value. And so as you think about your company, you think about milestones, you set milestones, you communicate milestones to your investors, you communicate milestones to the employees, and everybody is working to build value in the company. Because that's what matters. It's building value. Because if you're not, then you're probably not in business. And people have to make lots of decisions along the way, and I've had CEOs say to me, so what should I do now? And my answer is, which is the thing that you're going to do that builds the most value? Michelle and I met a company in Colombia who had a tremendous business selling to large corporations in Colombia and Latin America. And they had a consultant who said, well, if you want to grow your business even bigger, you should go to small and medium businesses in the United States. So we sat down and we talked with the CEO, and the question was, so what are you going to do with the business? And the CEO was very clear that in 2 or 3 or 4 years, he wanted to sell it to a large US-based corporation. And we had a list of people who we thought were potential acquirers. And we talked about it, and our perspective was that the people who would be acquiring the company, they wouldn't put any value on going after small and medium businesses in the United States. They would buy his company because he had been able to get large corporations in Latin America. And so while he could come to the US and build business there, each dollar of revenue from the US was worth about nothing, 0. He would be far better off focusing his efforts in Colombia, in Brazil, all through Latin America, because that's where he would be building the most value. And that for him was counterintuitive. And sometimes it makes sense to stay in your own geography. Sometimes it makes sense to expand beyond your geography, but you gotta think about where are you creating value. So as you go along in a business, just like brick wall that magically showed up in the middle of my driving, oh shoot moments happen. Things go wrong. And you know what? It happens to every company. Google, Facebook, Apple, Cisco, those things never happen to those companies, right? Wrong. They do. They happen to every single company. They happen to two-person startups. They happen to 2,000 employee companies. They happen all the time. And sometimes when they happen, companies fail as a result. Because the management team doesn't know what to do. They don't do the right thing. They become paralyzed. That's why we spend so much time focusing on the caliber of the management team. Because every company is going to have one or more OSMs. And it's the quality of the management team that will figure out, so how do we fix this problem? Sometimes you can't fix it. But more often than not, there are ways that you can fix those issues. It's the quality of the team. And so, for those of you who've started businesses and you haven't had an OSM yet, you will. For those of you who had OSMs and survived it, you'll have more. When I was a young venture capitalist, which was many, many years ago, I would invest in companies, and we would wire transfer the money to the company, and somewhere within a month, I would have a board meeting. And of course, I would show up at the board meeting assuming everything was going great. And of course, it wasn't. Right? These were early stage companies, and something went wrong. The key employee quit, a major new competitor came out, the product which was supposed to be done wasn't. Those things all happened. So then I turned into an old, wise venture capitalist. I would wire the money, show up at a board meeting a month later, and I went to board meetings assuming that something had gone wrong. There had been one or more OSMs. And you know what? I was rarely disappointed. But that's the reality. We meet companies all the time who say, you know, we raised a little bit of money, we're making great progress as a company, people are coming to us offering us money. We don't need money. So we're not even going to talk to those people about taking additional capital. And you know what? You always need money. You always need capital. And the simple, the ugly truth is, when things are going really bad, when you don't have customers, when you're out of money, is anybody going to give you money? Questionable. When you don't need money, when things are going well, people want to throw money at you all the time. And I'm not saying you necessarily take the money, take the conversation. Ask the question, what if? Think about it. Sometimes the right answer is not to take the capital. More often than not, the answer is, maybe I should, maybe not as much as somebody's offering me. You can't, when you really desperately need it, it's going to be really, really large ways. Which comes to the next point, which is, don't run out of money. Do I need to say that anymore? Don't run out of money. So you're on the road, familiar slide. You already now know what you didn't know before, that that brick wall is going to magically appear in the middle of the road. So drive fast, as you need to in a startup. Drive carefully, because when you're not looking, that brick wall is going to show up. Don't stop, because you don't want to. Don't crash, because you don't want to crash either. But figure out how to go around, underneath, or over that brick wall. And it will ultimately take you on the road to success. Kamsahamnida.